actually, for the older people part, they are against all kind of LGBT. But for the younger people part, the acceptance of gay and lesbian people is about, I'd say 50%, whatever, 50 to 80%, anywhere around that. But for transgender people, most people only accept those who already have the surgery. They do not allow like the pre-op trans women, things like that. They only allow the post-op ones.
What about general LGBT acceptance in China? Are people more accepting of gay people and lesbians and like, you know, more diversity, or is it still kind of conservative 90% we don't like gay people or trans people?
Oh, actually, for the older people part, they are against all kind of LGBT. But for the younger people part, the acceptance of gay and lesbian people is about, I'd say 50%, whatever, 50 to 80%, anywhere around that. But for transgender people, most people only accept those who already have the surgery. They do not allow like the pre-op trans women, things like that. They only allow the post-op ones.
And when you say that, you mean like legally, like in bathrooms or like other private spaces? Is that what you mean? Or do you mean just socially?
Well, actually, I mean just socially, because legally the government doesn't give a damn. They don't care.
Oh, okay. So you could just kind of do whatever you want? This is a dumb question. I know it's a dumb question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Are there gendered bathrooms in China, or are all bathrooms like unisex?
Yeah, there are gendered bathrooms, but the government never intervenes. They don't care. But actually, it's more about the social aspect. If you pass enough, the women will like feel safe, things like that. But the government almost never intervenes.
I have another question, and this is less about LGBT people and more about the different generations. I'm curious if you would say that your relationship with your parents is similar to their relationship with their parents? Or would you say like those generation parent-child relationships have been changing?
But actually, there's an interesting difference between China and the US, because China developed so rapidly over one generation. Like my generation, the post-90s and post-zeros, are the first generation that got higher education, university education, PhD, things like that. Our difference from our parents is the biggest, because our parents are from the first generation that's experienced reform and opening up when they were young. They were like post-70s, things like that. But before my parents' generation, they were actually pretty much similar, because when my parents were young, it was like the 1980s, when China hadn't really opened up a lot yet. So the entire country is conservative. There's not a lot of difference. But now, the older people, older than 40, are stuck in the 1980s, even 1960s. But we are like exposed to the more progressive ideas. So the difference is huge, things like that.
I am curious how your parents react, like your parents' generation, not yours. Well, yours maybe specifically, but in general, your parents' generation. How do they interact with having kids that are exposed to more global ideas versus like they're conservative? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does.
Okay.
Yeah. So generally, the average parents in China is anti-gay, anti-trans. They are just gonna think their children are brainwashed by the US. They are perverts. They are freaks if they are gay or transgender. And would like, if the children are young, like still in puberty, they may send them to conversion camps, but they're old, like they are not much they are gonna do.
Are there a lot of conversion camps in China? Or is that just kind of another thing the government says, I don't really care if it happens, I don't care if it doesn't happen, like, that's on y'all? Well,
actually, it's technically illegal. But there are it's technically illegal, but there are so many of them. So the government just fail to regulate these conversion camps, just mostly advertise on social media, because if they advertise in real life, they are going to be reported. Just advertise on social media and say they are for correcting internet addictions, video game addictions. But in reality, in addition to video game addiction, they also convert gay, trans people, things like that.
That's really interesting. I think they do very similar things here, where they run it under the guise of wilderness therapy camps. And that's conversion camps. That's really interesting to hear that there are a lot of like similarities in the way that our like people work. I don't know what I'm not allowed to ask. So just tell me if I say anything I'm not allowed to talk about and we can just stop it and I can cut it out of the recording.
Okay, can.
America says a lot of things about China that I don't think are real. And I'm curious Based on your perception of what you think Americans think about China, how much would you say that we're being lied to? Or like, what would you say the biggest surprise is for an American?